Welcome to the Dean's Roundtable podcast series with Bridget Johnson. Each month, we bring you game-changing conversations about K-12 education and leadership. Join us as top educators, field experts, and administrators share actionable strategies to transform your school community. Let's dive in.
Welcome to the Dean's Roundtable podcast. I'm Bridget Johnson, the founder of the Dean's Roundtable, a space created for student life professionals to connect, learn, share, and grow together. On today's episode, we're thrilled to welcome an exceptional panel of educators from Millbrook School. I recently had the opportunity to attend their presentation at NEIS entitled Leveraging Data to Boost Student Wellbeing, and was so impressed by their innovative approach that I knew I had to invite them to share their insights with our DRT audience. So joining us today, we have Billy Thom. LCSW brings 12 years of experience as a basketball coach, teacher, licensed social worker, and public speaker. His work focuses on helping adolescents and families navigate the developmental challenges of the teenage years, from mental health to performance mindset and family dynamics. Next, we have Eve Whitehouse. She joins us as the academic dean at Millbrook, where she oversees the academic program for 9th and 10th grades and teaches French. With her master's from Middlebury College and extensive experience in curriculum development, Eve brings valuable insights on holistic education, focused on developing students' whole selves. J.J. Morrissey completes our panel as Dean of Student Engagement and Wellbeing at Millbrook. With 17 years in education and an MED in Humane Education, J.J. implements data-informed approaches to enhance student engagement, focusing on creating environments where students flourish through evidence-based methodologies. I'm going to pause there for a second.
That was a lot.
That was Together and Today at the same time. Yeah. Together, they'll share their groundbreaking work they're doing at Millbrook School, where they're thoughtfully integrating technology and data to support student development and well-being in truly remarkable ways. Welcome, Millbrook School friends. How are you guys doing today?
Great. Thanks, Bridget.
Really great.
Awesome.
Thanks.
Happy spring. I really enjoyed the presentation at NAIS and came right up to JJ afterwards and really just wanted to soak in all the information because I think you guys are doing great work. But talk to the audience a little bit about what inspired your team to develop the data-driven approach to student well-being at Millbrook.
Yeah, it's a great question. I'd spent 3-4 years in the Dean of Students office at Millbrook School. I was an assistant dean for a year, Dean of Students for 3 years, working very closely with these two remarkable educators. And I grew tired of, as Dean of Students, waking up every day and just reacting to whatever that day brought to me. It felt like I was playing whack-a-mole and I was in Groundhog's Day. And every day you wake up and it's just the next thing that you have to react to and deal with. And it was frustrating because we were also collecting a lot of data. We were using the Wellington Education Initiative, Bridget, which you saw in the presentation, and we can talk about a little later. Just a platform that works really well to collect engagement data in academics, in student life. We have a relationship mapping program that we were doing. We were tracking attendance really well. And the problem was none of those programs were talking to each other. They all lived in different departments behind different usernames and passwords. And never did that data actually come together to help us be more proactive. And so as I was transitioning from Dean of Students into Dean of Student Engagement and Wellbeing, my singular goal in this first year in the job was to pull all this data together and try to actually make it work for us and be a little bit more proactive, actually add some proactive elements to our school, which it's hard for schools to do. All of us,
really hard.
Yeah, all of us on this call. How many plans, Eve, Billy, do we make in the summer? And we get to September, and you just get punched in the face right away with like just what's happening on campus. So for me, that's where sort of the energy came, and then it was partnering with Eve and Billy on what it could look like and what we should be measuring and how we should analyze it, how it could help our school.
Wonderful. And yeah, I agree. Just in terms of not being able to just have the time or the bandwidth to kind of pull all the pieces together, and being able to do that now and creating a system, I know has probably helped you guys immensely. So during your presentation, what were some of the key insights or methodologies you highlighted, if that makes sense to kind of ask right now?
Yeah. Eve, you want to start sort of academically what we're pulling engagement wise, like what we're looking for in the data that we pull?
Yeah, so using the Wellington Index, we're really looking to see if students are being challenged, but also enjoying their experience at the same time, right? So that tool has helped us see how students are feeling and self-reporting about their classes. And it can take us in a lot of different directions into what we do with that data. If things are smooth sailing and a kid feels like they're doing well in their classes and they're challenged appropriately and they're enjoying their experience with their teachers, we kind of leave that alone. It's when we start seeing anomalies or trends, right? So we notice that maybe we see a certain demographic that is really not enjoying their experience in a physics class, for example, right? So why are boys struggling in this physics class and not feeling engaged? And so we can start asking those questions about that class with that teacher. It's not an evaluation tool by any means. It's a self-reported tool that we use to help each other, right? So we look at that data throughout the year, but I think one of the big plans is to look at it at the end of the year and then make adjustments over the summer in terms of curriculum and whatnot to do that. Does that answer the question a little bit on the academic end of things?
Yep, absolutely.
And I think Billy's well set up. You talk about that relationship map, Billy. I think that's a big piece for us.
Yeah, Bridget, to your first question, I think we were also, right, JJ was having this experience of playing whack-a-mole. My role sliding from a classroom into the counseling space, and then thinking about sort of how do we educate families, right, beyond just our students. We were really thinking about how do we help families understand the more anecdotal, the more qualitative, right, ways that their students, their children are experiencing life here at Millbrook as students, right? And so one way that we feel is really important is to look at relationships, right, on campus. And so we have that sort of academic space that inherently sort of measures relationships with teachers, peer space, right? Peer relationships in the classroom. And then we have what JJ will talk about in a minute, right? This sort of more student life in the ways that kids spend time looking at after school activities, advisory, those sorts of things. But the piece that sets us apart, we feel like, as a boarding school from a day school or a parochial school or a public school is that there's also all of this informal gray area, right? A kid who's on my basketball team who maybe, right, I also work with in a dorm, also sees me in sweats waiting in the omelet bar line on a Sunday morning, right? And so the ability to measure in some substantial way those relationships, we felt like was really important. We had been measuring that through a really simple tool called Connect the Dots. We create a Google form. Every faculty member is listed on a sheet. Students go in and they just give a dot to each faculty member that they feel like they have a close relationship with. And that phrasing is a little bit nebulous. It's really interesting. Like if I look at my 8 advisees, the numbers that they're giving pretty much match like how they view relationships, right? One of my sophomore female advisees would say, yeah, I'm only going to put down the people who I would ask if there was a crisis, right? Because she's like pretty independent and, right, wants to develop, right, life in a way that she has some privacy and some agency. Then there's a junior came in this year and she put like 27 different faculty members down, right? Because she just like wants to connect with people and talk. And so there's a little bit of variance that way. But what we see is when we take that tool and then overlap it with the other tools that we're talking about and looking at, Wellington and our infractions and our attendance, what we get to see is a level of relationship mapping that for the most part bears out and connects and maybe even informs, right, some of the other data that we're looking at. So a kid who maybe is scoring pretty well in what Eve just described, right, but only has one of his classroom teachers marked down as people that he feels like he has relationships with. Well, maybe 9th grade English is just pretty easy for him, but he doesn't actually feel like he's connecting in that way. So the relationship component was something that we really wanted to build in, and it tracks really well with what we care about as a school and our mission, what we care about in the way that we sell ourselves to families, right? And all of those things.
So a couple of things I just want to jump in, and feel free to interrupt me anytime, folks, like I'm kind of running the train, but not really. How did you get from the dot exercise to Wellington? And did you already have Wellington? Like, where did you even know? How did you even know about Wellington? Like, how did it all come up?
I think a few years ago, I want to say 2021 or two.
Yeah, I think it was coming out of COVID.
Yeah, it was coming out of COVID. So we had a lot of balls in the air, like every school, right? And so we had heard about Wellington maybe from a peer school. They hadn't done a ton of boarding schools yet, from my understanding.
Okay.
And it took us about a year to say, faculty, we're going to do this. This will not be an evaluation tool. This will be a tool that will help us and get to know our students and their experiences in the classroom. And so our assistant head for academics, her name is Jarrett Clark. She's one of those educators who's takes her time when she's making big programmatic decisions, right? Gotcha. So I'm like, let's do it. And she really so I think we sort of balance each other in that way. And she took a year to sort of lay it out for people, have meetings with people with concerns and recommendations, all those kinds of things. And then we started testing it out really in 2023, I think, with our student population, and then looking at what that meant and doing it 3-4 times a year and looking at what that meant overall with the data. So the Wellington piece came around 2023. The DOTS piece may have been 2022.
DOTS was 2020, 2021. Like when I came in, we started doing DOTS, and then the Wellington came on board, and then we started doing infraction system this year. So things kind of rolled slowly out, and these pieces started to crystallize a little bit over time, which I think was really helpful because we sort of focused on one tool at a time before we brought it all together. And I think the interesting thing about Wellington is it began for us as a teacher tool, a tool for how to give teacher feedback on engagement. And we flipped it. And actually we look at it from this office and this project as student engagement. So rather than giving the feedback to the teacher, we actually like to look at it from the individual student where they're putting their dots and use that piece of data to complete our student. And so the initial energy behind Wellington, phenomenal tool, was a teacher feedback.
Okay.
And we've sort of flipped it, and we use it in a much different way than I think most schools. I don't know if there's any other school that's looking at this data like that, but it's really insightful when you do flip it and you look at it at the individual student level.
Yeah. Bridget, I'm the self-deprecating comedian of the group. These were siloed things. Like we knew that we had some interest in each of these, but this wasn't part of a 4-year plan where we said, we're going to add this and add this, right? We were collecting some data in academic life. We were collecting some data in student life. Yep. And then all of a sudden we looked around, JJ was feeling what he was feeling. And then we said, oh, we have all this data. How do we put it all together? What does this look like? Right. Yeah. But to JJ's point, the rollout was really helpful. If you're sitting in a school and all of a sudden we say to you, hey, this year we're going to put 5 new things in place school wide, right? People are going to look at us like you're looking at me right there. So,
yeah. And I think one of the drives, so we're a small enough school and we used to be smaller. When Billy and I started here, we were about 260 something students, and now we're 330. Right. Okay. And so it's a pretty, we've felt those growing pains in the last decade. And even though that number doesn't seem huge, it's huge when it comes to hiring faculty and classroom space, and dorm space and everything. We used to, and when we first started at Millbrook, we talked about students all the time in faculty meeting, and we focused a lot on the students who struggle, but we also focused on other students who were doing well and how to help them gain leadership positions and all these other things. And we've gotten to the point with COVID where we just didn't have the energy or time to do that. And so one of the pieces that frustrates faculty is we never get to talk about students, and we only talk about the kids who you're like, they're on the line of whether or not they can continue to be here. And so this sort of has offered us an opportunity to synthesize the conversation and talk about all students without having to sit in a meeting where you go through 330 students, right? JJ is sort of the pinpoint now. He uses all that data, and he uses it to be strategic about, okay, we're going to talk about these students at this faculty meeting, or I'm going to sit down with the advisors and talk about every single kid. And so a boarding school can promise we will talk about every single child, but it's just not realistic, I think, anymore. And also, if I'm a faculty member and I don't know that kid, or it can be difficult to hold everybody's attention during a faculty meeting. And so finding more effective, efficient ways to do that while using this data platform has been really helpful.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. So there are two things I want to do. JJ, I want to make sure I gave you the opportunity to talk about any key insights or methodologies that you wanted to share, but also wanted to talk about the dot exercise. And is there a minimum number? Like if one kid says they have one person on campus, is that okay? Or are you like, ooh, you need
Yeah.
to have at least 3 to 5 people on campus that you can connect with? So if you want to kind of tackle both of those, that'd be great.
Yeah. So I think insights, and for me, and I can talk about this in a second too, but it's the relationship piece for me. I
Yeah.
see all this data. To me, it's all relationships. The engagement is relationships. In student life, the engagement is relationships because we're asking them in student life to measure their engagement in the dorm, in the community, in their afternoon program, and in their advisory. And I think in the end, those three, the student life, the academic, and the DOT program, it all is about relationships. It's all
Yeah.
relationship based. And so that's what's starting to crystallize for me is really what we're doing is saying, how are your relationships with the adults on this campus? And
Hmm.
even when you look at our infraction system that we measure too, that's behavior, that's outward behavior. There's opportunities to look at how the other three are maybe impacting that.
Yeah.
How are they doing? If their relationships aren't strong with adults on campus, the likelihood, the correlation that the fact that their infractions are then going to be high is pretty good. The more we see the data come out, the more those two are pretty highly correlated. Like the lower you connect the dots, the higher your infractions. There's no case that I've seen yet at our school
Mm.
where there's sort of a high, and we can talk about how we qualify that in a second, but a high level
Mhm.
of dots and a high level of infraction. It just hasn't happened. Usually the partnership is lower dots, higher infractions,
Mm.
higher dots, lower infractions.
Lower
I think that's
infractions.
all about safety. It's psychological safety, it's comfort, it's support. And so for me, all of these things are starting to crystallize around relationships. And so what we're able to do, when you look at, you ask the question about the number of dots, we pull groups of students that have low level of dots and got and gave. So if they got 0, if they got 1, if they got 2, that for us is a group we want to look at.
Okay.
If they're giving 1, if they're giving 2, that's a group we want to look at. They start to give 3, 4, 5, 6. We feel like the triangle is the strongest
Gotcha.
shape in the universe, right? So once we get that triangle, we feel pretty good about a student's relationships. And then what we really care about is, are there students that show up in both of those lists?
Gotcha.
Are they getting and giving low on both? And that's a targeted group that we'll work administratively on. And that's a smaller group, usually 8, 10 kids.
Okay.
And then we can build in interventions based on them. So that's kind of what we're looking. And it also depends on their age. If they're
Sure.
October of freshman year, I'm not so worried about 0, 1.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
And then once in a while, there's context. Like I think of a couple of kids and they put 1 or 2 and they're juniors, for example. And we're
Mhm.
like, yeah, that makes sense. We know this child. They're super hooked at our school zoo, which is something that hooks some kids.
Yeah.
And they feel really connected to some of the people there and they're doing well in their classes and they're not having any behavioral issues and they're just
Okay.
humming along. But we know them, right? And we
Right.
know how they operate. And so we try to take the relationship in the context of knowing the kid and knowing what they're like and bringing to the table because we have 330 really diverse kids.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And so one of the things I want to talk about is just structure wise. How often are you giving the surveys? What's it like? How many questions? Talk about that a little bit because I think that's important.
The piece that I'll start with, because I think the presentation you saw, Bridget, one of the repetitive questions was, how long does this take? Right?
Yes.
How much of a night do we
How
really
much
have
time
to
do I
do?
have to do?
There was a registrar from a school, and her whole feedback form was like, as the person who would probably be putting all of this together, how scared should I be for what you're proposing? And so it's a really good question. We'll do it 3 times a year. So essentially each season. We did our last round last week. So
Okay.
we've processed some data, and JJ started meetings today, and I'll join meetings tomorrow with advisors. If you have a locked in public who can sit and do it, it takes 5 minutes.
Gotcha.
But literally, it's that Google form, connect the dots. You're just clicking names, hit save, hit submit. There are no narrative-based questions. There's no
Okay.
language-based questions. So it's all visual. It's names for the connect the dots. It's a grid, and you put for each academic class a dot on that grid. The x-axis is challenge to unchallenged. The y-axis is love to hate, right? And then same idea for the student life ones, right? So you're putting an advisory dot, you're putting a campus life dot, you're putting a dorm dot. That's a little different. That's known to needed. That's a phrase that we use, needed and known. So known to unknown and needed to unneeded on the axis. So completely visual, cognitively pretty accessible from a 14-year-old ninth grader to a post-grad at 19 years old. And the collection itself 3 times a year and pretty quick. JJ, I'll pass it to you just with maybe the obstacles to that we've faced in moments.
Yeah, I think it's super fast, and it's so nice to be able, I mean, like I said, Wellington's super quick, boom, boom, done. Google Forms, it's great. The problem is you need the captive audience. And so we've tried to have issues. We don't have an advisory period at our school. Most schools do. So we have it sort of different. And it means we don't have everybody sitting down at the same time with the tech accessible. It could be phone or computer. We don't allow phones during the day. So we need the computers, which is great. I totally agree with. So that's an obstacle, right? Because phones make it a lot easier to do these things. So that's, if anyone's thinking about data collection and taking it more seriously, finding those captive audience moments is really important, because it does take us 48, 72 hour period to get up to 88, 90%. And we're working at buy-in with our colleagues, even, of getting these things done in a timely fashion, and following up with our colleagues who, this is year 0 of this program. So they're still learning why this data is helpful and how it can be helpful, and how their participation adds to that. And so there's still some things we're working out, but we're fine tuning each time, right? So
absolutely, sure. And I think it's important to highlight. You said you're in year 0 of this, but you've already just talked about how long, like what the buildup has been. And
that's
so
true. Yeah.
schools out there thinking they're just going to implement this in the fall might want to just take a step back a little bit and understand that any sort of lasting change, it's important to be incremental about it and not just kind of come out guns blazing, because you want buy-in, you want people to understand what you're doing and why you're doing it, so that you can get the results that you need. Because if you don't have participation, you can't get the data, right? And if people don't understand why, or don't feel like it's necessary, or don't see how it can be helpful or beneficial to the community, they're not going to make sure it gets done. So I just want to take a step back and say, you guys are in year 0, but you've been talking about this for several years. And so there's no silver bullet into getting all this to work magically for your school campuses. And so I just felt like I needed to say that out loud. So
And we didn't even know you're -4. We didn't even know we were in it. Like, we didn't even know what was coming or what we were really building towards. And some of it is just you read the tea leaves, you feel the energy, and then you find your moments.
And I'll give a good example, Bridget, of that. This year, I played around with sending out a weekly. I oversee our Saturday morning programming, which is mission-driven programming. We don't have academic classes on Saturdays. And so I've been playing around with sending out just like a well-being scale, a set of adjectives, emotional adjectives. Kids can click and self-report. Anonymous, we added a little narrative piece. It's been going up and down as far as how much we've gotten collected. Not every grade meets every Saturday. And so coming out of March break, we were like, we're throwing enough at the kids. Let's hit pause on this. Let's really look at it in the summer and figure out a way to lay it out. And that was with a student body who's pretty used to answering surveys at this point, right? But it just wasn't clicking the way that we wanted to. So I think that's the other piece. Don't be afraid. It's going to take some time, and incrementalism is great. And don't be afraid to pivot or shift in the moment and play a little bit of jazz there.
Oh, I like playing a little bit of jazz, for sure.
That's a famous phrase at Millbrook School. We play a lot of jazz.
That is great. I want to play a little jazz too. I like listening to it. So Eve, as academic dean overseeing 9th and 10th grades, how have you incorporated the well-being data into the academic program decisions, or have you guys started to do that yet?
So there are a lot of different things that we're thinking about. I mean, the first thing is that we're going through a schedule review process next year. And so I am so certain that we're going to be thinking about this and how over the arc of the school year, especially the younger students, how are they feeling about sort of their classes in September versus January versus April, right?
Sure.
As we think about our schedule, which I'm of the mind that there could be some significant changes in terms of how we structure our classes, when they meet, whether the whole year, semester, if we should move to trimesters. I want this data to inform a lot of those things as we move forward, right?
Okay.
And so that'll be included in our committee to look at our schedule again, including having an advisory period, right? I think that's a huge piece of being able to run school well, is that our advisors have time. And then the other piece, one thing that came out of the NAIS presentation as well, is a program called MindPrint that gives a neuropsych for students online. So if you don't know anything about it, I would go look at it. I'm going to advertise for them here. And we're working with someone from MindPrint right now to potentially incorporate that data into this dashboard too. And so having every student at Millbrook have a learning profile, essentially. So when you look at a student's dashboard, you can see, all right, so I'll use my own feedback that I did from my own MindPrint a few weeks ago, which is my strength is verbal reasoning, right? But my weakness is flexible thinking. How might my dashboard look when I have those pieces of qualitative data next to it? Right. So thinking about using that, not only in the dashboard, but also with teachers, right? And using that as part of our communications system with teachers for students who may be struggling in their class or who may be struggling with particular assignments. So that's really specific. And then more broadly with the schedule. And I think just generally the feedback piece of how a student's doing or how a certain demographic might be doing. As I said earlier, we want to know if certain students are not feeling needed and known in their classes, or like they're not feeling challenged or they're feeling over challenged. We've had some situations in the last year or two where we've had students who are coming from maybe a public school and they're in total culture shock the first semester or two.
Sure.
Right? And then they come here and they're like, what the heck is this? I'm one of 12 in a class. I'm under a microscope. I don't know how I can build a relationship with my teacher. So using this data to really look at that student's experience, to talk about how they can adjust to this new culture and still be themselves at the same time.
I'll say even at a micro level, Bridget, just we're going through course selections with advisees right now. And even the ability to, earlier today, I had an advisee in, and she was just talking about, I like bio. I don't know if I want to apply for an honors bio class. And so to be able to even just use the framing without having her data in front of me, but even to just say, well, where are you challenged? What do you love? What do you hate? Right? What are you unchallenged in? And we got to the point where, hey, she's feeling really challenged in an on-level science class. She really loves humanities. Just giving her that language and modeling that kind of metacognition for her to say, okay, I'm going to try the honors bio test because it's during a study hall and I can take it, but I'm not going to have these expectations that maybe I had 2 days ago that I need to be in that class, right? And so to be able to healthily kind of teach her how to think about that for herself, the framework of it, I think, can be applied in a lot of different ways.
Absolutely. And so one of the things I want to come back to, because you mentioned that you guys don't have prescribed advisory time, and you talk about the importance of relationships. Talk about how the advisor relationship is cultivated and how you guys carve out time for advisees.
Yeah.
We at the moment it sort of crosses over with lunch on Tuesday, but every other. So it's a rotation between sort of a looser advisory period and lunch, and then a sit down formal lunch with your advisory, which is great. You're able to, the formal lunch is fine. You're not able to get deep because you have oftentimes other advisories right around you, or you're sharing a table with other advisories. So that's a challenge for building culture and community in that group. And then the other challenge is that there's no real requirement to meet. You don't have to meet anywhere specific. You can sort of flow in and out of the lunchroom. And if you don't give students or even sometimes faculty a sort of a mandate, they'll find reasons and ways to slip out of certain things. So it is a weakness. We are reviewing our schedule or in the process of it, as Eve said. And like that to me is I think, an area that we really need to improve as a school,
Mhm.
especially with the relationship work we're doing in data, and our mission is in a community where all students are known and needed. The advisory should have a much more central place in what we do, and we're doing that reflective work
Sure.
as we look at our schedule internally, and that stuff is rising to the surface. That this is really the key, I think, for me personally. And I'm going to go out and just like name it, like the relationships. That's it. That's what we're doing here. The education is going to follow, but the relationships,
Right.
why we're here and what we're doing. And so that's why we're using this data. That's what we're measuring. That's what we're doing really with this dashboard again. And
Yeah.
so saying what we're doing, the schedule should dictate and sort of show what you care about, what you value. And we just want those to match. So I'm doing my part, pushing in the background to get more time for advisors throughout the week.
I will add that the students have picked up, and I say this, I have a bunch of senior advisees, so they're like, I know what happens behind the scenes. They're hilarious at this time of year. They try to be really honest with you, and you're like, okay. And they've picked up that kids who have the strongest advisors tend to be flourishing, thriving, emerging.
Yes.
And so when you look at our DOTS data, I think JJ can speak more to this maybe, but there are these advisors who are considered like super connectors,
Superstars.
Yeah.
right? And so they connect with a ton of kids. And I mean, I think all three of us are that, right? That's part of what we like to do at Millbrook is connect with kids. And the example I'll have is I didn't coach my fall and spring. I mean, winter here, but I coach in the spring. And all of a sudden I have like 30 more connections than I did in the winter, because that's an important piece of my coaching, right?
Sure.
And so trying to get advisors to all be super connectors in some way, right? And that's part of the work that JJ needs to do with advisors in these advisory check-ins about all of their students and how they're doing and how they're feeling, is JJ coaching advisors on how to be advisors, right? And that's a huge piece that if you say to an advisor at any boarding school, that could mean anything. Right? It could mean they just like check in with you at their classes once in a while and that's it. It could mean I'm taking them out for their birthday or I'm making them a birthday cake. It could mean they're babysitting my kid. It could mean anything. And so I think a part of our role with all this data is to make sure that we're doing the education piece for our colleagues too, so that it's not just the same 10 or so people who are shouldering all the student relationships.
Oh, I love that. And I think that's a great segue to my next question, because it's relationships, yes.
Yeah.
And we talk about kind of student to teacher, but we also need to talk about colleague relationships and how people are feeling connected and seen and heard on campus and how you cultivate those relationships. Have you spent some time looking at that and on the adult side of things? Because I think that's a great connector to being able to appropriately train adults on campus on what it means to be an advisor when you know how to be a good friend or colleague on campus.
I'll say that we've grown quite a bit from a teaching reflection process, right? So a reflective process where in-class teachers, coaches, administrators, we've grown a ton in just school giving feedback and offering opportunities for feedback and reflection. Very little of that process where I think we've grown a ton. I mean, my first year here, I think I had our department chair come into my Spanish classroom once and she said, "Good job, keep it going." Right. Right. And now we do 1, 3, 5 years with all of the things that we should be doing. Right. But I think that process does not encapsulate a ton of what you just described, right? And I don't know that it should, right? I think those are two different things.
Sure.
A piece that we've been thinking about is really simple measurements, right? So Eve referenced the super connectors. Well, do we want to think about a way of structuring contracts where some of those people take on a few more advisees and don't do something else, and people who maybe aren't quite as comfortable with the advisory role slide into a space, right, where they're picking up an extra library duty or something like that that's maybe not quite so interpersonal, right? So I think that's a piece of it. I think that could be a place where we take some of this data, right, as we're thinking about our schedule. I think we also have to just think about what is a boarding school in 2025 look like, and I think it's drastically different than 2019, right?
Yeah,
that's not a very big chunk of time.
It's not.
And so I do think we could bring it that way. We're definitely, the three of us here are very wary of making schools about adults.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
And so I think that's something we haven't necessarily put into the process we're going through right now, just because we really want our colleagues to understand that this is about growing kids and the relationships that they have. But your point's well heard, and I hope that comes through in my answer.
Sure, absolutely. But I also think just you guys talked about like how advisors look different, or what the definition of advisors is such a, I mean, I think even on one campus, it's not even like across different schools of what advisors look like. And so being able to have those conversations and have that training, but also help people understand relationship building, because we assume that people working in schools know how to do this stuff effortlessly and easily. And that's not always the case. We've made some pretty broad assumptions there. And so being able to take a step back and have data to kind of back those steps up, I think help those people who feel like, well, I'm teaching, I'm a good teacher, so that's all I need to be here. And that gets tricky on a boarding school campus, let me tell you.
And Bridget, I think Billy referenced it and Eve referenced it too, this idea of the super connectors. And one thing that I've really been focusing on is at the end of this school year, I want to be able to present to our faculty the why. The how we'll get to, but you got to get to the why. Why is relationship building important? And sometimes you got to throw data at them. You got to throw data at some of these teachers who are data driven individuals and say, this is why. And so the John Hattie Invisible Learning, if you're familiar with his meta study, one of the things that he discovered in his study of studies is that teacher-student relationships have like a 0.72 correlation with academic success. So the stronger the teacher-student relationship, the more academic success there is. It's 0.72, which is pretty strong. So what I did with our data is I've taken our connect the dots, the students, how many they're getting from faculty, how many they receive. And I put it into AI, and I put all the GPAs into AI, and I said, tell me what you see. And AI spit out and said, there's a 0.8 correlation between the number of dots a student receives and their GPA. So you could be cynical and say, well, that means that faculty are giving better grades to
the kids that they like.
Just don't go there. That's not the case at all. The reality is that those students that have more faculty dots are feeling belonging, deep-seated belonging at our school, and are taking the academic challenges, are putting themselves out there, are taking the extra courses, doing the extra things because they know they have a web of support. They have those faculty around them that are going to support them through that. And so, yes, their GPAs are higher. And that correlates. I mean, John Hattie's meta study and that little work that we've done this year, it's one, I've only put the data in once, so let's wait and see how solid it is over time. But it was really intriguing to me that like, there's a why I can share with our faculty. Why do we build relationships? Here's a research study that proves why, and here's our school study that proves why. And so finding those moments, the super connectors, another thing I did in AI, our super connectors, as I said in the presentation, their advisory groups are more well-connected than the non-super connectors. So they actually have the ability to pull their advisory group up into broader connections across campus. And so sharing that data out, like thinking metadata, like the larger framing for teachers is going to be really important. Start with the why, and then we can get Billy in to talk about the how, because that's he's the social worker, right? But I want to be the why. I want to hammer this down and say, this is why we do the relationships, because the research bears it out that this is what we should be focused on.
And Bridget, I would say from about 2018 to 2023 were the first 5 years that we tracked contact with our counseling office. So students, we would gradient it, yellow, orange, red, right? So sort of your typical school support. And orange was a more consistent, or they had an off-campus provider that we were case managing with. And then reds were obviously wellness leaves, withdrawals for mental health reasons, those sorts of pieces. And over that span where we started tracking it, and then I would present 3 times a year to the faculty, we saw a huge uptick in faculty referrals to the counseling office and a pretty large anecdotal, and I if we went back and measured it, I think we would have seen some quantitative data as well, right? To say a shift in stigma as well, right? We have a lot of senior boys. I could pull it up. I'll pull it up in a second, but right, you think about kind of junior, senior boys as maybe a group who isn't going to be so keen to come in and talk about relationships, just broadly brushing, right,
Sure.
with that stroke. I think it's something like 60% of our male seniors have come through our office at some point this year. Right. We're at just over 60% of the school has come through the counseling office.
Mm-hmm.
And around COVID, that was a high level of acute needs.
Sure.
Now we're at a very small level of acute needs, and almost probably 85%, almost 90% of our data this year says those are yellows and oranges who are coming in. Okay. So I think we have a pretty well established ability to move the needle, at least internally here on the community at Millbrook. Mm-hmm. And so again, I think JJ's point of the why is really key, right? To be able to keep educating and kind of meta-educating the community on how this should function, how this can function.
Nice. So, Billy, I just want to take a minute here because you're talking about kind of the mental health support and the data collection that you're doing in that setting. What sort of ethical considerations do you need to kind of keep in mind when you're doing that sort of work?
Yeah. So I think it's a valid concern and a valuable conversation, right? Mm-hmm. So the piece from a data standpoint that we've been really thoughtful about throughout is protecting, obviously, student identity, right? Sure. And who has access to all of this data. Okay. So all of the data is coded by a student ID, and only a small group of us have access to that student ID. And so if we're in a core health meeting, for instance, and we're pulling up some data to talk about a student, that's a really particular group of people in that meeting, right? It's a school doctor, it's a dean of students, it's a dean of student engagements, an academic dean, and it's our counselors. We don't publish this. We don't broadcast it anywhere, of course. I think the other piece that made me feel a lot better just after those MSW stats classes and the research classes was that all of this is self-reported, right? And so there is a different level of, I think, data. There's less variability, right? From the standpoint that this is just a snapshot of a moment that a student is saying, this is how I feel. We do that every day. Right, in schools. That's an exit ticket. That's a formative assessment. That's right, a check-in conversation at the start of a basketball practice for us. Right, we do those things often. And then I think the last piece, and there was a question or two in a row at the NAAS presentation. I think some people hear data and fear that we're going to lose the humanity and the narrative piece, right? And I definitely have sat in spaces from a social worker perspective and said, whoa, like this data, it's cool, all the math you just did, but like the kid we're talking about is also, right, look at all the aces and all the things that are going on at home in his background, right? We got to capture that in some way. And so for us, I think the biggest ethical consideration is that we're never using the data in isolation, right? Gotcha. There is always a narrative piece to it. There's always a contextual piece to the conversation. Mm-hmm. And in fact, we kind of want to be skeptical about the data when we first see it to be able to fill in the human pieces of what that number is telling us, or that correlation is telling us.
Yeah, on the top of our dashboard, Bridget, as you remember, there's a quote, and it's on every student's dashboard: manage the data, inspire the student. So every time we open this up, it hits us in the face that we're here to manage. We're managing the data, but we're inspiring the student. That's the goal. So the data is not the end goal to make the data look better. The goal is to help our students and inspire them partly through this data, also through the qualitative observations that we have in that conversation too.
Sure. So in all this work, I mean, and it looks like you've got the data to kind of back up what you're saying and the reasoning behind changing programming or implementing some new things. But, what sort of resistance, because there's always some resistance, right? Or challenges have you encountered when trying to implement these approaches, even though you've got the data to say, hey, look, this is really what we should be doing?
Yeah. I think it's been... I don't think there's been resistance necessarily. Okay. Like, no, I think our faculty, I think it's just awareness. Like they're just not really aware. They're not used to using data in this way. And it's just, I have to stay in front of them. I have to present at faculty meetings. I have to share. I have to kind of fight for time in order to make sure that even administratively this stays on our
Top of mind.
on our radar, because it's just not something we've ever done before, or anyone at any of schools they've worked at before
Right.
use student data this way. So right now it's not about anybody fighting back and saying this isn't right. It's just, hey, it's just awareness, like making it a habit, making it a discipline. This is what we do. That's what I'm saying. Like making this something that we just do, and that'll take some time, as any habit does. But
Sure.
I think that's where we're working right now. It's on me to stay in front. Billy and I are going to present to the faculty tomorrow at faculty meeting about the latest round of data. I'm going to fight for some time at the end of the school year, at the beginning of the school year, in intervals, so that we're constantly putting this in front of faculty and our students. Actually, I find they like this. I find they actually, and I've heard a few teachers say when it's time to fill out connect the dots, say, "Ooh, I like this. I like doing this."
Yeah.
And I think so. So we're only fighting attention on the student side, like executive functioning. Can they remember to do it? But we're not fighting.
And some colleagues, but yeah.
Oh, yeah. But it's really
I find it's the busyness of whatever time, because every time is busy, right?
Sure.
And so my office is in sort of one of the main academic building, and I'll have colleagues come by and be like, do I really need to do this? I'm like, yeah, you really need to do it. Right. And not understanding the bigger picture. And I think a piece that's going to help us understand the bigger picture is then when we really get to debrief all of this with the faculty at the end of the school year. And as JJ said, fighting for time, right? For time. Like tomorrow we're fighting time with DEIB, right? Like I don't want to fight for time with DEIB. That's also really important. But we've got an hour to have time together as a faculty. And so trying to entreat to the dean of faculty, oh, we need this, right? And he's like, I've got like 10 masters to serve right now. So I think as we sort of roll this out a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more, and it becomes more institutionalized, then faculty will have it ingrained in them that this is a valuable moment that I need to do. And they will ask less, do I really need to do that thing?
In our external conversations, Bridget, with other schools, right? Because we've had some schools who are at the presentation reach out. I think and correct me if I'm wrong here, JJ, but what feels like a pretty consistent question is, what's the scale of how you're sharing this? Are we sharing it with students? Are we sharing it with families? That question internally for us has been met with some resistance. I think if we polled an administrative team here or a group of folks here are really thinking about it, there'd be a couple of people who are like, we are only using this internally. I'm probably on the other end, which is, hey, if we can use it to supplement our conversations with families, why not? And then there's a lot of people sort of in the middle saying, let's see where this goes, and we'll continue to think about it. So that might be a future resistance that we have to think a little bit about. I think the more, right, any relationship, the more honesty that we lay out on a table, the more risk there is for harm, the more risk there is to say the wrong thing, the more risk there is to need a repair later on. And so, right, I think some people's minds go right to, oh, if a student sees this, now they can comment to a certain teacher in a space, or a parent can complain, or X, Y, Z. But again, I think that's back to the ethical consideration. This is actually the only use we want to have for this is to help students excel, move towards flourishing.
Right. And I think sometimes when schools, we get kind of caught up on always feel like we have to do the right thing at the right time all the time. And there are never any missteps. There's never any times that you have to pivot. There's never any times where you have to say, we didn't get that right. Yeah. And because of that, we are so resistant to doing something that's new for us that we sometimes hamstring ourselves in that way, which yes, we are the adults, we're teaching, we're supposed to be kind of imparting knowledge to the students, but lot of ways it's a two-way street, right? Like we learn from
Yep.
them, they learn from us. It's a give and take. And the more that we can kind of let our guard down a little bit and be a little bit more vulnerable, saying this is something we think is really important, being transparent as to why we think it's important, and understanding that in this venture and in this endeavor and in life, sometimes we have to shift and make changes based on the information that we find out along the way. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? And
Totally.
so that's what I hope schools start to think about and understand when they start to spend a little bit more time on the student life things. Because the academic stuff they've been doing since the beginning of time, right? It's very comfortable. It's kind of concrete. You get an A, you get a B. It's 1 + 1 = 2. But the student life, the emotional, the relational pieces is where things get a little tricky, get a little murky, and get uncomfortable. And I don't think in the past we've really tried to lean in. We'd rather not. And so helping schools to be able to do that, sounds like you guys are starting to do that, is really important. I want to go and talk about the students a little bit because we haven't talked about what sort of information you're sharing with them. Are you sharing with them on an individual level? Like what's going on there?
So student-wise, we haven't shared or pulled students in directly to their sort of totality of their data. They're obviously aware of what they put, right? They're aware of how they've sort of self-reported each of these measures. They're aware of their infractions. They're not really aware that we sort of pull this together and talk to the advisor, but we're very clear as they're filling out the data that we use this, use this data. It's important to us. We let them know we do use this. We do look at this. And the reality is they're probably like, yeah, right. Like, yeah, right. Like, who's gonna? But we tell them, we're very clear. We look at this and I'm clear with any students that ask me, like, this is a big part of my job to look at all of your data. So take this seriously and do it. Cause I look at it and the goal is to make your time, your success here even greater through this data, even better through this data. So whenever students ask me, I'm very clear. We announce it when we release the surveys, we announce it in assembly. We say, fill these out. We use this. We look at it. We do stuff with this data. Just letting you know. The details of that, the full picture that we pull together, we use the advisor as the sort of the next conduit, I should say. So we use the advisor as the conduit. And we're in the middle of meeting with every advisor on campus, going over every student's dashboard. So by the end of in 3 weeks' time, Billy and I will have had 330 individual conversations, which is awesome.
Wow.
It's like the best 9 weeks. We do it 3 times, 3 weeks at a time. It's the best 9 weeks of my job that I've ever had, is to be able to do that. And then the advisor becomes the conduit of sort of that narrative and the interventions for the most part from there.
And Bridget, I think that's the space where some of that colleague teaching that you referenced before happens, right? We can ask some of those questions right away to our colleague. All right, you've been with your advisee for 3 years now. What surprises you about this? Anything that seems off? What's maybe going on in life that spiked a little bit or that dropped a little bit? And then, right, I think the most useful part of it, which is a little bit of what JJ was referencing, like the how, right, is I get to then do a little bit of quasi-therapy in the moment and say, all right, well, how would you feel if you were to bring up with this advisee, right, that they seem to be really entertained in 3 of their classes? Does that feel awkward that you maybe have to say, hey, you got A's, but you don't seem like you're being pushed. Let's talk about that a little bit more, right? And so we can delve into a little bit of the colleague support there in a way that feels a little bit like teaching the advising piece, right? Well, what does this conversation look like? What does this conversation feel like?
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So as we kind of try to wrap this up, I feel like I have like 30 million more questions, but I want to be mindful of your time. JJ, you talked in the beginning a little bit about the number of connections and the number of infractions and how those are related. How have you used this kind of in the discipline realm, if at all?
Yeah. So our discipline system. So if you think about formal discipline, that operates outside of this dashboard. We haven't involved that yet. Infractions are really about what we're looking at. For the most part, it's going to be tardies and it's going to be absences. It's going to be tardies. So and we know all as educators that attendance is a huge marker of well-being and connection. The better you feel at school, the more connected you are, you're going to go. Nothing's holding you back. But if the opposite is true, if you're not feeling belonging, you're not feeling psychologically safe, you're going to find ways to wriggle out and do that. So
now, JJ, I'll just add, right, for folks who are listening who aren't boarding school people, for us, that means a school meeting. For us, that means a Friday night forum when we have a speaker on campus, right? For us, that means signing out with the person you're supposed to when you go home for the long weekend, because there's a safety component to that, right? So it's really about interacting with systems on a school community.
And the goal is that this data helps us get proactive and get in front of a student who's going down a slippery slope. And we have disciplinary measures that it sort of operate as soon as a student sort of crosses the Rubicon. But one of the ways that we're hoping to use this data more and more is to get in front of those issues, especially early on in October when we do our first data poll, is see where the patterns are and address those. What's really nice about this system is that we can be targeted, right? Individual. We can be tailored. We can see exactly which part of their data we need to tailor our intervention to, and we can be timely. We can do it 3 times a year. So we're hitting those 3 T's, and it's really powerful. Again, we're in year 0, so we'll see when this is fully in next year. But so far, it's really promising how we can use this to get ahead of especially kids who start to show patterns of attendance infractions that might be heading towards some feelings of invisibility or not belonging. And we can work to fix that.
Yeah.
And at the same time, I'll think about a specific student we have here without naming them. We have a student who their infractions are Looney Tunes, right? And we only use the word infraction because it's part of Blackbaud, so if we can't change the language in our LMS. But tardies and lates and little tiny things that accumulate. But the student feels very connected to the community, has amazing relationships with faculty and other students, has passions, is really, really bright, and sometimes misses class. And so therefore struggles on the next test, right? But we know this student really well and they know us really well. And so we can take those with a grain of salt. And we have this measure that's sort of in between the discipline system and this conversation where we call it an accountability hearing. And it's just a restorative practice, really. When the kid hits a certain level of infractions, JJ and I actually, the adults that meet with that student, the advisor, and we sit down and say, what's going on, right? Why are these tardies happening? If it's a 9th grader, often it's what habits do you need, right? How do you set an alarm clock? Are you on your phone late at night? Things like that. Communicating with the student and the family that we see them and what they need to do in order to grow and be more independent at boarding school. And sometimes those accountability hearings are I really don't like it here. I really don't like boarding school. I didn't choose this. My parents chose this. And so we get deep into what is actually happening in that more reflective moment with them before it hits discipline, right? So this is not a discipline conversation. You got these infractions. We're going to have this conversation now, right? And it is really helpful to have those pieces put together with the infraction, with knowing the student's data and having the reflective piece between some of the administrators and the student.
And I would just argue the key piece of that Eve, you built when you were overseeing attendance is that the child has agency in that conversation, right? It is fully restorative. It is fully educational. And it might be for some of these kids who are bumping into it, especially at that October time, right? The first time they've really gotten to sit down and share a little bit about what they're feeling and experiencing here on campus in a way that's more than just the us welcome in a Spanish class or something in what note do you feel like in a music class, right? Like a little bit deeper. And so that piece, I think, I'm not part of those processes very often unless there is a clear mental health piece that we need to work on. But the thing I hear when kids then come into my office and I kind of do the catch meeting after, right? How'd that go? Is almost always I got to say some things that I did not think I was going to say while I was in that space. And so that's a really nice piece of it.
That is a really nice piece. And it's interesting that we ended up kind of talking about attendance. That's been a hot button topic across schools, day and boarding, which I was really a little bit surprised on the boarding school side of things. I'm like, what do you mean
Yeah.
attendance? But it's something that people are really wrestling with right now. And to have some data and be able to have some of these types of conversations that are not just go to class or you're going to get detention or whatever, I think is really something that schools are looking for and trying to figure out. And having you guys kind of flesh this out for them in that way, I think is really helpful. So, couple more questions for you guys and I'll let you go.
No.
So looking forward, how do you see your approach evolving in the next few years? And you've talked about that a little bit, but kind of what is kind of top of mind for you there? And are there new areas of student well-being that you're hoping to address?
Mind print is mine, but I've already talked about that a little bit. I think
Yep.
that's the piece that I'll start heading next year as we
Okay.
add into it, and sort of the educational psychological piece of it that I'm not sure all schools are doing right now. And a third of our students currently have educational testing.
Wow.
And so that's increased over the course of my time here, and
Sure.
it will only get more, I think. And even if a student isn't told early intervention wise that they need educational testing, I think it'll be really helpful to have that data as we think about how students learn and operate in a community, simply because your educational testing isn't just in the classroom, it's in the dorm,
Absolutely.
and it's in the afternoons when you're coaching. And
Yes.
knowing certain students and their testing has really helped me build those relationships with them outside of class too.
Awesome.
For me, Bridget, it's and I don't want to steal JJ's thunder here, so JJ just put a sign up if I'm stealing. But for me, it's thinking about how the targeted piece of that, right? How do we think about groups of students, right? And how our systems are affecting those groups of students, right? Trying to get to a piece where we can then group together, right, some of this data and say, okay, who are our new international students, right? What is that experience like just based on this self-reporting data? Our returning LGBTQ plus students, right? We have some, I think, thoughts on that and feelings just as we go through a year, but to be able to actually take this, partner with our DIB office and say, how are we truly being inclusive here based on what the students are telling us, right? From a system standpoint. I've been, the last few weeks, we've been running just like really informal conversations with our school nutritionist, our school doctor, and me with different dorms. And the prompt that we've started with is just, guys, I'm a 35-year-old male who barely uses Instagram, and I'm getting targeted for things all the time, wellness-wise. What are y'all being targeted with, right? Gummies, juice cleanses, right? All of these sorts of things. And kids want to talk about it, right?
Yeah.
And so we can start to think about, all right, well, what are our systems here? Something as simple as what can you have mailed to campus that makes Juice Cleanse way more accessible? What am I doing to educate families on the Zooms that I run, right? Because last Wednesday, about 3, 4, 5 kids raised their hand and said, well, actually, my parent sent me some of this stuff, right? So continuing that part of like the systemic approach for me, actually, can we scale it and operationalize it a little bit for the systems we're trying to put in place?
Gotcha.
And just to finish, I think for me, the relationship revolution is coming. I think the more that we are impacted by AI and kind of turned on its head, our educational programming and system, it's going to happen so fast. I don't think we're all aware of how fast all of this is going to get kind of flipped on its head. And what's going to last, what's always going to be there is the relationships. And I think schools are starting to turn through well-being initiatives, right? Through building counseling centers. I saw one in a magazine. It looks like a hospital. It looks like a hospital wing was just built in their school. It's got like a welcome person. It's got like 4 offices down a hallway. It's bananas. It's great. But I think for me, that also misses the point. Awesome. They're doing it. The point isn't programming. The point isn't some large building that you're going to do, or the point is those micro connections. The goal is the micro connections on the walkways, on the bricks, in the classrooms. Are you looking each other in the eye? Are you saying hello? Are you using names? Are you going to sports games and giving a shout out the next day? Are you really building those relationships through those micro moments over time? Because that's what's going to set you apart as a school, it's also what's going to serve your student the very, very best.
Right.
All of our schools are college prep and life prep schools. Doesn't matter what your mission actually says. At the end of the day, you prepare for college,
Yes.
you prepare for life. Two things done.
Exactly.
You can't get there without relationships successfully. You gotta have a community. If you work yourself backwards design, how do you get a student there? You got to take them in and out of the zone of mastery, into the zone of development, proximal development,
Yep.
constantly doing this dance of being able to push a kid, bring them back to mastery, push a kid all day long, every day. It's exhausting. They need to be vulnerable. They need to fail. How do you get a kid to fail? You get a kid to fail and be vulnerable in a community in which they feel belonging, right? They feel like they can be safe. There's psychological safety. In Maslow's hierarchy of needs, between physical safety, which we all provide, and self-actualization, is psychological safety, is belonging.
Yep.
And how do you get belonging? You get belonging through relationships.
Relationships.
Right. So going forward, you take that forward, that's how it's going to work. And so I've referenced this book a lot. It's called The Good Life. It's a Harvard study. And I suggest any deans out there that are listening, Robert Waldman and Mark Schultz, it is an amazing study, 87 years longitudinal study about what makes us healthy and happy. And the number one thing above anything else in 87 years is relationships.
Relationships.
And so all of this work, all of what we're doing, all of what we need to be doing isn't something fancy. I mean, it's just in those tiny moments. And how do you get folks to really dig into those tiny moments and believe that that's the case? And the second thing is, don't believe you do it, measure it. Right?
There
Don't
you
just
go.
say you do it, measure that you do it, and then do it. And I think that's what our program is really, really doing well so far. And I'm excited about what the next few years will bring for this.
Awesome. I'm here for the relationship revolution. I love it.
I'm in. Yeah, it's it.
I'm all in.
Yeah.
So, lastly, what advice would you give to schools interested in developing something similar to kind of work on their student well-being or their student life communities on their campuses?
I think, first of all, reach out to any of us. Absolutely. I think, you want a system. Building your own system takes a lot of work. Like it's a ton of work. We started with Wellington, and what they did for us, what they already have in place is a super easy place to start because it's built and it's relatively cost efficient and easily absorbed into a budget, in my opinion. And then take it one piece at a time. Learn from what we talked about earlier from our lesson. Like start with something that's built so that you can just implement it and then see what works for your school. Think about it. Take it seriously. Carve out time and carve out some money. I think having an FTE that which is what I have. I have a new FTE in this position. I get to think about this stuff all day. I get to build the formulas in Google Sheets, and I get to make this work. And then I get to meet with all the advisors and I get to make our system work. We're not trying to put it on somebody who's already packed to the gills with other stuff to do. So there's some financial components that I think heads of schools should take seriously. And there's just starting with the easiest thing, which is a program that's already kind of built, and you can see how you can sort of like Legos. We stuck on pieces ourselves after we had some easy to deal with data.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Only thing I would add, Bridget, is good coaches steal, great coaches steal what works for the players they have, right? Like taking something and just placing it in your space as well as it's designed is probably not going to work, right? And so being able to know what you're actually trying to get out of these measurement tools that fits your school community, I think is the really important part there. All the things that JJ just talked about, build that out. But if you're starting and saying, I want to measure X, but your students are over here in orange, that doesn't make sense, right? And so really doing some self-reflective work as a community to say, this is where we are and this is what we need. Okay, now what do we build to measure it?
Gotcha.
And I was going to say, make sure it's mission driven, which is essentially what Kelly just said. But then I say this all the time, and it's a not correct quote from Amy Poehler's autobiography from like the early 2010s. And I'm not saying it correctly at all because I don't remember it exactly, but it was something like, stop talking about the thing and just do the thing.
Do the thing.
Stop talking about the thing and just do the thing, right?
Yep.
If you talk about the thing and you're not doing the thing, then you're never actually going to do the thing. And so just do the thing, right? And so start small, but then actually do it and make yourself vulnerable. And then eventually it'll either catch on or people will be like, that's not a good idea. And you'll have to drop it and move on. But I do think doing the thing is the first important step too.
So, yes, relationship revolution, do the thing. I think
Put it on a t-shirt.
Put it on a t-shirt. And I think that's a great place for us to end. Oh my gosh, Eve, Billy, JJ, thank you so much for your time today. If you want to get in touch with Millbrook School, we'll have their information at the end of the podcast, but they're at Millbrook School and you can get in touch with them that way. I'm sure they'd be happy to have a conversation with you about student life, about relationships, about the approach that they're taking and what they're seeing in their school. But again, I'm so excited for what you guys are up to and how that is transforming your school campus. So congratulations on that. Well done. Appreciate you. If you like what you heard today and are interested in hearing more from the Dean's Roundtable, we encourage you to like, share, and subscribe. And as always, thank you for spending time with us on the Dean's Roundtable podcast. Have a great day.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Dean's Roundtable podcast. Is your student life program delivering on your mission? Our new K-12 student life assessment moves you beyond anecdotes to evidence-based decisions. Through comprehensive stakeholder surveys and expert analysis, you'll get concrete insights across 8 essential dimensions of student life, from culture and wellness to staff effectiveness and resource allocation. We are seeking founding partner schools to be first to experience this transformative assessment process and help shape the future of student life evaluation. And because this work shouldn't be done in isolation, join our Student Life Professionals community of practice, facilitated monthly with Trey Education. Connect with fellow deans and student life leaders for real-time support, idea exchange, and solutions to your biggest challenges. 8 sessions per year plus ongoing collaboration through our shared messaging group. Whether you need data-driven insights, peer connection, or both, we're here to support your student life leadership. Learn more at deansroundtable.org. Today's episode was hosted by Bridget Johnson in conversation with Billy Thom, Eve Whitehouse, and JJ Morrissey. Produced and edited by Andrick Sigmund and music by PremiumBeat.com. For any questions, contact information can be found in the episode description. And, as always, thanks again for listening.